No. Hello, everybody. So this is the first webinar for our academic year of 2017-2018. And since today is 9/11, we thought it was the most appropriate one to start with the new curriculum from our Labster on the 9/11 remembrance using media literacy practices. So we're going to have Clayton and Carolyn Fortuna who are going to share with us the curriculum, how to practice it, where are the resources, and how to make it work. So Kara and Carolyn, take it away.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so Jonathan, you're sharing the screen?
Yes, here we go.
Awesome.
Oh.
So thanks for joining us, everyone. As Jonathan's getting set up, today was the 16th anniversary of 9/11, and we started to think about this project a little over a year ago. And one of the things that I was really struck by when I started the school year last year is that my 9th grade students did not have any real memories of 9/11. And I thought on a whim the weekend before 9/11 that I would reach out to my friends, a lot of my digital literacy friends on the East Coast, but beyond that as well, my high school friend or my high school teacher friends. And we were able to get maybe 10 or 12 responses to a Flipgrid post, and I'll be talking about Flipgrid a little bit later, but it's basically a video platform that allows you to share and respond to various prompts. So last year was just quick, let's just figure out if we can get some posts from different people from around the country, and in fact we did. We got some really touching responses. My students then responded, listened to many of those posts, and some of them responded. It wasn't a requirement for the class by any means, just because it was new, and I wasn't really sure how to manage it. And so this year, today actually, all of my students had an opportunity to look at the Flipgrid posts and do some responding. So we're going to walk you through what the Media Education Labs curriculum looks like. This was produced by myself and Carolyn Fortuna this past summer. And if you look on the left side of the screen, you'll see some of the newspapers, not all of them. I had about 8 or 10 different newspapers up from around Michigan. I think there's some New York Times as well. And those newspapers I was gifted actually from a colleague who no longer teaches with me, so I put those out every year. And there's also the poster from the museum of many of the different newspaper headlines or front pages that came out on what would have been September 12th, 2001. So that was what my classroom looked like today. And we can move on, I believe, to the next slide, Jonathan.
Okay.
So as I said already, Carolyn and I worked on this, and Carolyn's an awesome editor and was superb in her idea generation. I have a cat joining me tonight for our little... Not climbing on my hair, at least. All right, we can go on to the next slide. So I already mentioned that my 9th graders last year were the first group of students who had not been exposed or had any real memories of 9/11. So it was really touching when kids heard some of the very emotional responses from people who posted. And I really wanted them to have a firsthand accounting of events, and I thought that it would be really good for all of us to maybe put together a crowdsourced collection that people from around the country and maybe even around the world might want to use. And we are sharing it as along with media literacy ideas and how to scaffold discussions in this very short unit of instruction. It's designed primarily for 9th through 12th graders. And Carolyn is going to talk next about the curriculum itself.
Next slide, Jonathan, please.
Oops. Okay.
Okay, so you will see here that we do have some hot links that we can share with you, and you can click through to see the actual Media Education Lab site, and this is where the curriculum lives. So I'm going to start by just giving you a little bit of overview. We realized that with this population who did not have a whole lot of familiarity about 9/11, that we needed to build in some specific scaffolded lessons before we were able to introduce the Flipgrid. So you'll see from the left side here that there's an introduction to the curriculum as well as a YouTube that gives a little background knowledge. I'm going to talk about the first and the second of our 3 lessons. Kara will describe the third. I'm going to start with, what do I know about 9/11? Jonathan, new slide. Okay, so we wanted to see what it was that the students actually knew before we introduced any conceptual learning. So we thought that we would just have them brainstorm in small groups what it was that they already knew. And by activating that prior knowledge, we would get them to identify what they did and did not know about the topic, both for recall for them and for informing the instructor so that she or he would be able to fill in the gaps of knowledge. So either a cluster diagram, as is in the middle, with the main concept in the middle, which would be 9/11, or the KWL. What do I know? What do I wonder? And what am I learning? So that would answer the questions that are at the top of the page. What do we know about September 11th, 2001? And what do we want to know? New slide. So in the next part of the activity, we wanted the students to do their first close reading. And as we know, close reading is a slowing down of the text to really zoom in on the specific words and the language choices of an author. It can be applicable both to a print text as well as a visual text. So the schematic in the left side gives some primary grade questions. The middle is for virtually any grade level, but then the right is taking that same series of strategies for close reading and then applying them on the film. So we would have them read How 9/11 Changed America and continue their KWL, and then also view a video. Photographer Tom Franklin remembers 9/11. This is going to remind them of other prior knowledge that they had before we do any direct instruction. New slide. Then we want them to do a 3-2-1 activity. We want to see 3 key terms that they have just learned, whether it is from accessing the prior knowledge they already had within their inner voices, or whether it is from this group work that they did. It's nice to do a 3-2-1 with what they've learned, what they would like to learn, and also a skill or concept that they think they have mastered, because that infuses a feeling of success, and we absolutely want that. Part of this is all shift from an ability to access prior knowledge toward that necessary creation and reflection, which is the schematic on the right side of this slide. New slide. So from those that first series of activities in lesson 1, we have now prepared them, and they can go into a second lesson, which is to look at some of the museum's front pages from September 12th, 2001, as well as from the 9/11 memorial. And you can see in the left schematic, we have helped them to build some of these skills and strategies necessary for doing this kind of inquiry. So they have these comprehension strategies already built in. That in turn leads us into the right-hand schematic, where we're taking this series of reflections on what we knew, what we're learning, and we're starting to build skills and strategies that will transcend this particular unit and have the students embed so that they can leave our classrooms and go off and apply these same skills and strategies in other contexts, including other classrooms, life, real world literacies, and then eventually college and career. Next slide, please. Kara, take it away.
Okay. So the third lesson, the students are going to practice listening, and they're going to practice having conversations. And they're also going to learn how to do both of those things with a certain level of empathy. And again, these students may not have actually experienced this before, did not experience this event, but they've experienced trauma before in some way. And so they should be able to draw on that knowledge to know what it's like when someone experiences something that's highly emotional. And once they are done with that, they're going to participate in a digital discussion using the Flipgrid platform. Jonathan, if you could switch to the next slide. So in the listening with empathy section of this lesson, we have a variety of articles that are very, very short. They're maybe 300, 400 words at most, and they're from Psychology Today. So that is a hot link on the page, The Art of Listening from Psychology Today. Students can read one or more of those articles and then take some notes on some big ideas that they gleaned or synthesized from the various articles in order to help them listen with empathy as they are listening to some of the people who participated in the Flipgrid. Then, next slide, please. Thank you. And then they're going to do some practicing there's some interview skills that we teach them as well. And then we take them into the Flipgrid. And I've heard several people ask me, what is Flipgrid? So I thought some of the lesson tonight or some of our webinar tonight would be teaching people how to use Flipgrid. For those of you who don't know, it's a digital tool. And it's free. There are paid accounts as well, but you can use it for free. It allows people to record audio and video in order to share and reflect and respond. And so what you would do is you would type the URL into your web browser, and you would create an account, provide your name, etc. So what I thought I might do, Jonathan, I think at this point I need to take over the screen, so that's possible.
Wait a second. Here.
Okay, so I'm going to start sharing here. Okay, so am I in the wrong place? I am in the wrong place. All right, here we go. So we're here. I'll create a quick account for you if you can see my screen. So, and if you can indicate that, I would appreciate it. So I'm going to go to flipgrid.com. And you'll see that you can create a free account. And you can type in your name. I'm going to use my old AOL address just because I don't have an account, Flipgrid account associated with that. I actually still have my AOL. I know that's an unusual thing these days. All right, and then my account is free. And my instruction type is, I'm going to pick high school, and I'll type in THS for my school, and I'm going to type in technology. And so I can create my grid. And it's going to process. All right, so here is what this looks like. So I can now have a grid that is for me, and I can create as many different topics as I want. So what I could do, for instance, would be I could type in my name, Mrs. Clayton, and students in our class might be the grid purpose. And I'll create the grid, and then with each grid, I can have a new, as many topics as I want. So I could put in Yanti Friesem as one of my topics, okay? And I could add, create a topic. It's hanging up at the moment. But I could have all of the students in my class be individual topics. So if I wanted them to respond to work throughout the semester, they could just go to their own Flipgrid topic and post. And then I have the ability to moderate whose posts I see, the whole world can see, or which posts I might delete. And so that's one of the really nice. Yeah, my screen is a little bit frozen at the moment. Okay. So there's Jonathan. So Jonathan could then go in and he could create his own topic right now, or his own Flipgrid post. And he would do that by viewing this like this. He would press the plus button and he would enable his camera and microphone, and then he would start the recording process, which I'm not going to do here right now. So that's how you use Flipgrid. I mean, I'm going to show you how we used it specifically with the 9/11 curriculum. So on this page here, we had, I don't know, maybe there's 25, yeah, it looks like there's about 25 different videos from last year. And several are new in the last couple of weeks, including as new as Pam's today. So I'm going to show you Reese. Reese Donick is part of our media literacy community, and he provided a post to us last year, and you can see here that there are 4 little circles by his name. That means that 4 people have responded to him. So when I go back to here, this is the whole, well, this is part of the grid, okay? And then this is what Reese's panel looks like. So I'm gonna click on Reese so you all can hear him.
I was 27 at the time. I lived in Brooklyn and I worked in Harlem teaching sports classes. And I was teaching a class that morning when the first plane hit. And found out later from someone who was listening to the radio that it had happened and thought it was an accident. A few of us went to a diner to watch the news coverage on the TV and saw that another plane had hit by the time we got in there, and the towers fell as we were watching there. You know, so you start to process. You've never seen anything like this before, but you realize it's something major and that you need to let people know where you are. And I tried to call from a cell phone, and they were disabled. I tried to call from a payphone, and same thing, no service. So I was able to get an email to my family that I was okay, and then I started walking home. And it was about an 8-mile walk. And on the way, we were walking towards the towers, and others were walking away, some covered in ash. And people were just really quiet and you know, learning a little bits from each other and thinking, but reflecting. It seemed like everybody was reflecting. And then we walked over a bridge. Folks on the other side were handing out waters, and that to me was the indication. It was sort of a theme that followed, that New Yorkers were really taking care of each other, and you could see in their eyes that they were, you know, compassionate and just wanted to help.
Okay, so that was Reese. And then, whoops, and this will obviously just keep moving forward. You can set it up so it doesn't advance. So I'm going to go back to Reese so I can grab him again.
I was 27 at the time.
And then I am going to play Joseph's response. This is from today.
It's good that the people came together at such a tragic time. I was like 1 at the time, so I don't have much of a memory of what was going on there.
Okay, so that was a very brief response from Joseph. Here's one from Hakeem.
I think it's kind of crazy how you had to walk down the street and actually see like the after effect and the of what happened with people walking down the street covered in ashes and everything. I think it's kind of crazy how you actually had to deal with it like in person. I know that's much more challenging than just seeing it on TV.
Okay. So we didn't go through all of the lesson today in class. I really just wanted to show them the Flipgrid. And so that's what this would look like. And the Flipgrid is also set up now so that Reese can come back and respond to the students who had some wonderings about his experience. And what I'm hoping will happen is that this will provide a really great way to have some asynchronous conversations, to get people to kind of share their memories, and we can go back in 5 years and ask people, wow, what did you think? So that's my goal with this curriculum, and I'm pretty excited about it, I have to say. An extension activity that we have, and I know that you're seeing my entire screen right now. The extension activity is that people can actually go and map where they were at the time. So, for instance, this is Michigan. Our friend Amanda was somewhere in the University of Boston or wherever she went to school. But I was here in the Livonia, Michigan area. And what I found so intriguing about this map is that I could actually zoom all the way in to the area of the building where I was watching the television coverage. I was actually teaching a violence in the media unit that day. So this is where my room is, and this is where my best friend Heather's room was. And so I thought that was kind of unique, because maybe people are going to post, hey, I was on this specific street corner in New York City, or I was in Pennsylvania at this location, or I was in DC at this location. So I'm hoping that all of you who have a memory of 9/11 that you'd like to share will go to the Flipgrid, post your 30, 60, or 90-second memory, and then go to the map and add your PIN and let us know where you were on that day, or where someone, and maybe you even have a family member who would like to share as well. So I can stop sharing at this point, or I'll keep sharing so that Carolyn can now talk. She's going to finish up for us.
Okay, so we would like to turn it over to you who are here with us tonight for our webinar, and help you to identify how you would adapt this series of lessons for your own student population. So what kinds of background knowledge do you think your own students would need in order to make sense of this 9/11 curriculum? Is there someone who would offer us a sample answer?
I work with students in middle school, and so for our students, they would need sort of a context that is age appropriate for them to understand what occurred on that day, and also further links to more information about it. I know we have some students in our school that have personal connections to this tragedy and lost some people in the tragedy, so I would also want, from an instructional perspective, how to handle this with sensitivity, because I know we have some students that have direct ties to this issue. And that would be a great start for us, just having that background at an age-appropriate level for middle school.
And Jen, you made a really important point. Lots of us are subject area specific instructors and really have not been trained in the affective realm. And part of our modification for this unit is to suggest if there's a guidance counselor or an adjustment counselor that could be part of a very intensive day of discussion, we would really recommend that you ask such a person to come join. You make a very good point there. How about then moving on to the next question about skills and structures? So certainly we want them to gain some understanding of 9/11 and all the ways that it has had ramifications on the world in which these students are living today. But what specific skills and structures would you also want them to take away beside the content knowledge?
Carolyn, can I just say that when I was listening to the last question and Jen's response, is there any way of letting people know how old someone was at the time so that students could focus maybe on, you know, respondents who were the same age as they are now? It just might be interesting. I don't know if that's possible, but.
Kara?
So you're asking us to, I think that's a good suggestion. Seek out somebody who is around 34, 35 years old.
Or who was 17, you know, when
be
when
34 now and then, yeah.
Yeah. So that they can see what it would have been like to be 17 and what thoughts did you have?
Yeah. We have somebody on the grid who's a fifth grader, or who was a fifth grader at the time.
Yeah.
And his name is Austin. And so his memory is very different than somebody who's older. But yeah, we could definitely reach out to somebody who's in that age range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that idea. That's really good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I say that some of our students have personal experience, they've heard from their family members that someone was lost from their family, you know, so they've heard the stories, but as you say, they were not alive at the time. But that would be a really good way to tie into their learning.
And even like, I mean, when I was in Costa Rica in 2003 and 4, I lived in a complex, a family complex, where there was a little girl who was like 5. And we were at a familia, you know, a festa one Sunday that they had every Sunday. And all of a sudden, I'm playing with the kids, and all of a sudden, this one 5-year-old goes screaming, you know, into the house. And I'm like, ¿Qué pasó? You know, what's going on? And they said, oh, you know, she's so afraid of airplanes. Every time an airplane flies over, she runs inside. And I said, did you guys have coverage of 9/11 when that happened? And they were like, oh yeah, we were glued to our TV set. We were watching it all the time. And I said, and how old was Daniela then? And she was like 2.
Mm.
You know, like, so even, you know, I think there's even some kids who don't know the effect that it had on them because they were too young to even process it. But it might be good to get some psychologists or, you know, like guidance counselors who dealt with it at the time or who have a background in childhood trauma who could talk about that. I'm sorry, Carolyn, do you want to go back to your question?
No, Kim, I think you're making some very good points about how some of the people who will be visiting this curriculum really do not have their own personal memories. They have memories, though, that have been formed from hearing about the experience from others.
Yeah.
This is a media ed lab curriculum, and we know that the media is a profound influence on us all, and the messages that the media has been disseminating over the last 15 plus years have been very, very powerful about patriotism, about loyalty, about censorship, and what it means to be an American citizen. So there's a lot to unpack with this curriculum, and it can be very difficult. Now, Pam, you have quite a significant background in library and library science. Would there be, though, particular, I always call them structures, you know, we want them to be able to apply something that they have learned in the classroom to other contexts. And is there one such skill or structure that you could see from your background that would really rise up from this curriculum?
Actually, my work with libraries and librarians has been pretty recent. My own background was more in prevention and human development. So my work in schools was always as a prevention consultant. And I did a lot of prevention programs. But yeah, I just really, from that perspective, I feel as though, the emotional piece is just so huge. And I think that's what's great about what you've created here, is that kids who, you don't get that from reading something or even visiting a website, the personal story and the emotions that are involved in it. And as far as the libraries, my first thought that came to mind was, Kara, do you want us to share this with our lists, our social networks? Because I have a connection to the youth services librarians in Rhode Island. I'm sure they'd be willing to put this on their newsletter and send it out, to 185 librarians in the state.
Yeah.
And maybe have that be something that they deal with.
My goal is for this to be shared as widely as possible. I think that we have the start of a really great curriculum that I think we can always add to later. I just think that this ability to share these experiences with our students is very important. And it's funny because I see our students, the students that I have, and they're not always, they don't always have a lot of empathy. And I think that this is a way that we can help develop that skill for them. And however we can do that, I think would be great.
Yeah, I was really impressed with that when you were going through the curriculum, that you had that piece in there. I think it's huge. I saw, from the 10th anniversary, there was a quote that you might want to throw in there somewhere from President Obama. About service and about capitalizing on that piece of New York and of America that came together, that Reese talked about, just that handing out water, like New Yorkers taking care of New Yorkers. And there was that brief moment in time before we went to war when there really was a sense of community. And I think it's happening now with Harvey and Irma. And, that's even a discussion to have. Does it take a disaster for us to remember how to be in community with each other?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this curriculum then has a way, and people could take a piece of it and then extend it to whatever is going on in their world right now. So 9/11 disaster, Irma, Harvey, Jose on its way in, et cetera.
Yeah.
So,
So I want to jump with the skills, because we have like 15 minutes and I want to have some discussion also with the other participants. So I think, you're talking about empathy, which obviously is my interest, but to answer Carolyn's question is, empathy is not just to feel what other people are feeling, but it's also part of the reflection. So I think the way that you structure the curriculum allows to have a self-reflection, to see yourself as a 27-year-old Reese experiencing it, but also see yourself today and how do you feel about it and what can you do about it. And then, as you say, connecting now with disasters that are happening now, and do we need the disaster? So when you look at the skills, empathy can be the big name, but it's can be broken down into like self-reflection, awareness of others, understanding the feeling that other felt or what was their experience back then, but also going back and seeing where I am today and what is my responsibility as a citizen today.
And Jonathan, you bring up a good point about empathy, because we have the opportunity in the Flipgrid to have students dialogue with the people who have offered their recollections. And we need to help young people to learn etiquette as a social skill, but also so much of digital literacy in this day and age surrounds digital citizenship, of which digital etiquette is a part. So we probably want to do a little bit of practice about what this looks like on the web. It's a permanent record of how you express yourself, especially, as this question says, in a very difficult topic context. And so if we can help students to maybe do a little role play ahead of time before they post, and to give each other, like Renee Hobbs does, thumbs up or thumbs down, or maybe you could reflect or add a little bit more to a part. I think we can help each other to learn ways to be as rich and full when we respond to each other, because this can be very delicate.
Mhm.
So do you want to continue with the other slides? Do you want to have discussion? What do you want to do in the next 10 minutes?
Next slide.
Minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Kara, do you want to go, because these are the questions about the entire curriculum?
Yeah. So we've had some responses already about maybe asking some mid-30s people to check in and give us their thoughts of what they remember from their high school memories. Are there other thoughts that you have on this curriculum? How it could be used, how it might be adapted? What, if you've had a chance to look through it, are there any changes that you think make sense? I feel like it's kind of a living thing. It can evolve and change.
Well, I would look as, like, speaking from a media literacy perspective, so they create the Flipgrid, but to tie into the museum activity that you had in the beginning, why can't they create their own first page as a group? And kind of, after looking at the testimonials of the Flipgrid, that's like the journalistic kind of inquiry, and kind of, okay, so take the data that you had learned in those 3 lessons and kind of create, how would you present the knowledge that you have?
I love that. Yeah. And it's fantastic. And then they can pull in images from wherever.
Yeah.
And I love it.
I would really like to ask other participants about their reflection, because we have really international, so different people that are coming from different countries and experiencing in different times of their lives. So I would like to hear from participants, what do they think about this curriculum, and can it go also outside of the US? Would this curriculum work in China, in Turkey, in India? So anybody who wants to jump in.
Yeah, I think this curriculum will also work in my country, even though I haven't experienced it, but the way the curriculum has been structured, it would be very beneficial to understand how the ones who haven't, because India has separately also experienced different sorts of terrorist attacks, and we are kind of politically, if you see, we are still kind of battling about it with Jammu and Kashmir, which is a battle between Pakistan and India. And we're still facing Mumbai attacks and things like that. So to have an international perspective on how, because 9/11 was a big thing. I think when you say that people in US who were not in New York were glued to TV, we in India were glued to TV as well, because it was a huge thing. And we were all worried. We were worried about people whom we knew were in US. And even if people did not know anyone in US, it became a huge, it became an issue at a humanitarian level as well as, a political level. So I think it would be great to have an international perspective to see how the whole thing maps out in kind of conjunction with what you're currently doing. So I think it's quite useful to.
So as a college professor, do you see using one of those lesson planning with your own students?
Yes. In fact, I was looking at it in a manner, because I'm teaching mass communication students. So the moment I saw this, for me, the first thing was how do you kind of report this whole thing? So even as journalists, when you need to have a certain ethics when you're covering very sensitive, and the whole issue of empathy that you all were talking about. So when we are teaching young people about terrorist attacks or empathy, or how a victim per se just felt, and how you're supposed to cover it or question, very often we tend to do a whole secondary victimization of the entire experience, which exactly I was seeing coming out of this entire curriculum, where I can engage my students in discussing how this international piece of news affected them, and how did they feel vulnerable, and how as journalists they feel it can kind of contribute to what they're currently doing, in terms of reporting, covering news and things.
Right. Thank you, Shahana.
Good.
Anybody else wants to share?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can.
Continuing Shahana's international perspective, I was thinking about, comparing or contrast media coverage about 911 through kind of different media lenses, and also since I'm interested in social media and social learning kind of perspective, if there's any way that an international connection can be built through social media, and kind of doing a compare and contrast, study about like different perspectives in different countries, and kind of taking your empathy point of view, see how people from different, or students from different countries can take away from media coverage or media content, or just understanding about 911 in different social contexts.
Thank you, Zoe. So any other reflections about the curriculum? We have 8 minutes. Any parts that you would add, any parts that you would see how you would do? We have such a variety in this panel of higher ed, high school, middle school, elementary school, which obviously we would do it differently. But can you see working with your own students, with people that you would work in the library, in the school, in the college level? How would you implement the curriculum?
I guess one other question that I have too is, do you have something in there anywhere that asks, what's your 9/11? Because like, as an elder, I've been through a lot of those times when everyone has a story, when JFK was shot, and when Nixon resigned, and when the Challenger exploded, and those moments in time that everyone knew where they were and had a story. And so even for the kids that weren't alive during 9/11, I'd love to know what their 9/11 is. What has happened in their life that has had that kind of an emotional impact. Like Sahana was saying about, the Indian corollary and the terrorist attacks there. It just might add an interesting writing assignment, or a whole nother Flipgrid that a teacher could do in their class. Just a thought.
Yeah.
And I'm teaching teacher candidates who are all situated in urban settings this semester. And as I'm going through this curriculum, it occurs to me that there were large numbers of undocumented workers in the towers who never were able to have their families receive any kind of compensation, because there was no Social Security card, for example. And I'm thinking how that will resonate with the students in urban centers in this day and age, with the dreamers who are seeing a very fragile future ahead of themselves right now. So I'm seeing an immigrant strand that certainly could be worked into this.
And, you know, since you said that, Carolyn, one of the other things that I was thinking about was one of the most amazing things to me about the New York deaths, because that was where the most occurred, were the obituaries in the New York Times that really were wonderful about painting human pictures of every single person who died. That might be something that you could definitely get your hands on, and that you could have students read a couple of them and then report back on what they learned about that person, or what they wonder about where their family is now, or what went after that. You know, they were just really well known for what a great job the New York Times did on those obituaries. And they were, whether you were documented or a citizen or not, they did everybody.
Nice.
I have this last one thing to kind of add. It's kind of the researcher in me talking, but this is going to be a brilliant study once you have like all the data, you know, because you're creating a curriculum. It would be great to also see the different voices, because every, like in terms of you know, the minorities as well as the dominant voice in terms of their experience, because it's going to be extremely different. So that's, you know, to create that empathy among students for the minorities, because what they face and what they're facing as a consequence of it since 9/11 is something that is still being documented. So I thought that could be a great thing for both of you to.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Sahana.
Hanyan I think was trying to say something.
Yes, I want to say something. Because I have not like gone through the curriculum, so I don't know what's like inside it. But I mean, I am a language teacher in the university. If if on September 11th, on this day there is an English class, I may bring up this topic. I mean, for students to reflect and to talk about 9/11. But I mean, if like in December, if Christmas, I wouldn't bring up this topic, because it is like a historical like event, right? And because my students may not have much to say like about like September 11th. I mean, for the language class, but for media, maybe for media and journalist like students, they may have a lot to say about September 11th. So for me, like if like today is Tuesday, I have a language class today. This morning is September 11th. I will bring up this topic. That is perfect for like language teaching class. Yeah. Thank you, Carolyn and Kara.
And Hangyang, I don't know if you're aware, but there are websites that you can go to and click on newspapers around the world and have students study the same event, and how different countries and different newspapers relate to that. So that might be very interesting as a language lesson, because you could see how different publications choose words in order to come up with the same description of the topic. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. Can you send me the link?
I'd be happy to.
I think, Carolyn, that's a really good point. And tying into what Sahana was saying about making sure that we present many different perspectives. We have a lot of students in our schools from many different countries who have families that have different cultural experiences, and it would be really interesting for the kids, I think, to go to that website and read the different headlines from different countries where they may be from or know students from, and to tie in and maybe even ask their families about their perspectives tying into this and bringing that personal connection in.
I just put a link to the museum in the chat. And then if you go from there to front pages, the museum front pages or today's front pages, you'll be able to see all of the front pages from today. And you're also able to see archives, which is where we pulled some of our images for 9/11.
So thank you. We come to the end of the hour. I want to thank everybody, and especially Kara and Carolyn, for making the curriculum, distributing it, and walking us through it so that we can see how we can use it in different settings and in different ways, and gaining a lot of media literacy skills and also other skills, and learning about the historical perspective, but also where we are and reflecting on it. So I want to thank you very much for participating, and looking forward to have our next webinar 2 weeks from now on reflection and anti-bias curriculum.